break it. Break it down, break it down, break it. Break it. Break it. Break it. Break it. Break it.
Hey Siri, turn on the light.
Break it down, break it down, break it. Break it. Break it.
Hey Siri, turn on the board. Siri, turn off the door.
Thank you everyone for joining the show. This was a great show together. Catch you guys in the meeting. Take care.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Rohit Dadwal. I'm the host for the session. A very warm welcome to all of you for joining the session today. Our topic today is maneuvering and understanding the multi-channel consumer journey. It's as simple or as complicated as one would want it to be, because the consumer journey is very complicated in these days. Primarily the fact that it is technology which is driving a lot of this change right now. I would like to start by thanking everybody on the front lines for helping us put together the environment that we are in to be able to discuss and hold this conversation. These are uncertain times, as we all know, and there is a lot of work that is happening on the front lines by the doctors, the grocery store people, the police, and everybody else. So our gratitude and thank you to all of them. I do have a very esteemed panel with us today, and I would like all of them to actually come onto this screen so that we can start the introductions for the panel.
We can't get on. Hi, yes, right. I think you need to turn our cameras on, I think.
Okay. There you go. Great. James, thank you for joining us. Pooja.
Pleasure.
Hi, hello. Hi, everyone.
And Ms. Tu. Ms. Tu, if you can switch on your camera, please. Thank you. So let me get started with the quick introduction to our panelists. Let me start with Ms. Tu. Ms. Tu is the country lead and of specialized nutrition at FrieslandCampina in Vietnam. She's been in the working environment for over 20 years in fast-moving goods, and her journey in FrieslandCampina is over 10 years. But what you may not know reading her LinkedIn profile is she is a marathon runner, and she's run all the 6 world marathons, and all 6 world marathons. Is that right, Ms. Tu?
I'm planning for it, but I did twice already, and without the COVID, I should have 4 already in my hands now.
Yeah, and and she spends a lot of time actually on the roads, trying to get prepared for this, and also has a loving family of children, and one of them is an avid golfer, like her husband. So, and I like anybody who plays golf. So that's my personal like. Thank you for joining. Thank you. We have Pooja. Pooja is the CEO of The Glitch, and creative agency based out of India. She's She's also had a vast experience, previous stints in FMCG companies like Unilever, and she's set up this agency about 10 years back. As part of The Glitch, her ambition is really to work on all the new technology related businesses and all the new businesses, along with some of the traditional like Dea, Geo, etc. And is an avid follower of gender equality, if I would, 50-50 in terms of leadership, etc. And has a 3-year-old who she along with her husband is trying very hard to be a climate warrior. What is a climate warrior, Pooja?
So basically at home, we recycle and reuse everything. So be it water, be it, all of the food produce that we bring into our home, the way we compost. She's also learning to grow her own food. So we in our apartment, we've taken one of our balconies and we're now growing our own food. And during COVID, We've actually taught her how to germinate seeds. We've taught her, you know, how to take care of little saplings, how to plant them differently. So even though we have a tub in her bathroom, she only takes a bath with 1 bucket full of water every day. And if she has to have a hair bath, then she will have 10% more water, because I want to prepare her for, my husband and I both want to prepare her for what's to come, right? We can still turn the shower on and have a great bath, but that's probably not going to be her future. And I don't want her to be shocked with that. So that's really what we're trying to do.
These days, it's imperative that we teach all our children how to save the environment. And I think COVID has taught us a lot with that. But that brings me to our next panelist, James Hawkins, CEO of APAC for PhD. James has been in this business for over 15 years, track record of building agencies. Earlier stint was with Dentsu. I worked with James during his Dentsu's days also, and has a very hands-on approach, if I may. I've seen him work. He's an avid rugby fan and also a coach for under-9 cricket rugby academy in Singapore. Used to play himself, but now is fascinated and gets a lot of satisfaction teaching the children, and especially his daughter and his son. And himself, he has moved on from playing these sports, rugged sports, to something which older children like tennis and golf.
Yeah, that's the way it is. We all get old.
Good, great. Thank you for that, guys, and really appreciate you guys taking your time and joining us. So the discussion on hand today, and I do have a quick MMA overview, which I will do during the course of this presentation. I wanted to start off the discussion with all of you on what does it mean to be in an omni-channel world, and how does it get facilitated? Every brand today is trying to tell their story, and every story unfolds at different touch points. For me, it may unfold at while driving. For somebody else, in front of a TV, somebody in front of an iPad, and for others, it could be in the newspaper. So, given the technology and the immense acquisition of this technology that has happened, that we've seen in the last 3 to 4 months than ever before, I want to kickstart by maybe, James, with you, if you could help us understand, what does it really mean to be in this journey today? How do we facilitate this journey, and what does it really mean on a consumer, from a consumer perspective?
Yeah, listen. Yeah, I mean, listen. I mean, by no means am I sort of the overall authority on this, but you know, many of the trends that we've seen, particularly and as you referenced, in the last of 6 months through these current uncertain times that we have, I think I think what we want to take away from this is that we've seen an acceleration in the trends that were coming before the start of 2020. We saw a more connected consumer. We saw an increasingly savvy consumer that not only values a brand for its product, but also the origins of the product and the production process that goes into those products and how they're produced, and really kind of coming into this sort of socially aware consumer, and brands have to be aware of this socially aware consumer that we're now dealing with. So there certainly has been this rise in socially and environmentally conscious consumer, and for that we've seen this acceleration in the purpose. I mean, is a word that's often bandied around. A number of meetings that we have with our clients and say it's really important for us to have a strong purpose and to articulate it. The sort of tying it back into the omni-channel world in which we live in, there is a greater need for authenticity and for real earnest values that have to be bestowed, whether that's through the social channels. More people are doing more research, there's more available for them, or from omni-channel and talking about an acceleration of the trends that we've seen for years. We've seen that e-commerce is growing, and it's growing fast, but particularly over the last 6 months, and with many of us, some of us are still in isolation and lockdown, and we're sort of the consumption is going through different channels. E-commerce is without a doubt the key element that has been accelerated within this period of time, and we can look at any of the given markets and sort of almost double the increase in the number of deliveries that are there. We've seen subscription models, whether that's groceries being delivered on a weekly basis, or how you consume your entertainment and the Netflix and the Disney Pluses of the world. But it really does affect all aspects of our consumption. I mean, we know that people have begun to buy online, but over this COVID period, again, we've seen a 50% uptake in people's readiness to buy clothes online. And it's not just clothes. I mean, we look at sort of 65% increase in personal care products. So the FMCG businesses are having to deal with a new channel, which is sort of the commerce, whether it's m-commerce or e-commerce. And that has a massive effect on the way that we plan, way that we are consuming media, way that we plan media on behalf of our clients. And that is the acceleration that we're dealing with now. So I would say that there's 3 or 4 big points in there that I'm sure other people have got views on, but that's what we're seeing from a consumer perspective.
So it's interesting you said that, because, and Ms. Tu, if I may come to you, from a marketeer's perspective, whatever James alluded to the fact that there is this drastic change, and it is primarily some of the industries that he spoke about are predominantly technology-driven industries. Unlike the industry that you come from, which is really the brick and mortar industry, are you guys seeing the same impact, or is it different? And if different, how is it different?
I think it's very good that James sets up very nicely regarding to the consumer and how the consumer behavior, including the technologies and also the mindset of shipping. I think doing marketing for more than 20 years, and if I compare that in the past few years compared to 20 years ago, especially now for the COVID, I think the job of marketing is really, really challenging. Because we don't know where the consumer we can catch. Because the role for the marketer is that we need to be where the consumer are. And we need to be where the message, provide the communication, the channel to the consumer in order to catch them, to connect them, to convert and continue. So based on that, very, very pragmatic and very complicated. So as a marketer, we see the similar trend. We see that the consumer journey nowadays is just not one thin line, but it's totally complicated and different. And you can make the list of the consumer journey too long. You never can have the end for the consumer journey. So as the consumer, we need to look at all the channel. And then we draw the consumer journey. This is the starting point. And then from there, how can we reach them? How can we catch them? What message we need to provide to them? And what the channel, because the consumer nowadays, they don't just only look at TV or only one a channel of the internet, everything, social, sitting, KOL, everything nowadays, really complicated. And then in terms of the purchase, at the end of the day, we need to translate into sales. Then the consumer don't just go to one certain channel to buy. They can buy 3 to 5 multi-channel. And then especially now for the COVID, they can go either hyper supermarket or e-coms or mom and baby for my particular a category, or the general trade. So as a marketer, we need to be ready with those kind of the complicated, drafted, the consumer journey, open-minded, and learn apply the new technology. The technology is now happening every single day. And then from there, then we can follow our framework like FrieslandCampina, catch, connect, continue, and convert and continue in order to really capture the consumers and serve them.
That's very interesting. And let me, Pooja, and I'm going to come to you with this, the next thought. But between James and Ms. Tu, we're talking about really the consumer and the change of consumer. I'm not sure how many people actually are aware of this, but let me share with you some stats that I was reading over the weekend, that the space at which the consumers are acquiring or getting used to new services. And we all know that it took about 75 years for the TV to become 50 million users, and then internet, it took 4 years, Facebook 3 years, a game like Angry Birds Space, it took 35 days to get to 35 million users. And there are many such examples. Now, in an omni-channel world, the growth of the digital consumer, and I'm actually saying the digital consumer, because everything, I do not see a user who is not a digital user today, because everybody carries a mobile phone. And because they carry a mobile phone, they are a digital user. So is there a difference of what a new user is? What is the purchasing journey of this new user, digital journey of this user, versus a user like my mom 30 years back? She was not a digital user. She was a brick and mortar user, if you will. What is that basic distinction of this journey between the two users? Have we been able to bring that up?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I mean, I'll jump in if just on one of those sound bites, and something that may help us understand the modern consumer is, I mean, the reality is that we have to close the gap between comms, communications and commerce. And we have to really make sure that every touch point is shoppable, because that's what the future consumers and the new consumers expect. We have to ensure that all forms of digital communication are not more than one click away from facilitating that purchase. People now are, we are striving so hard to get their attention. And as brands, we're doing it in a variety of ways. And I think that sort of Pooja will talk about potentially sort of the renaissance of creativity and the ability to cut through and get people's attention. And then from a technology and from a media perspective, we have to ensure that we're not more than a click away to facilitate that purchase, because to be quite honest, people are getting bored and their expectations are so much higher now that we need to create that shoppable moment for them.
So, I just want to take a step back for a second and focus on the generational gap that you were talking about, Rohit. And that is, for all the marketers on this call, that is our sweet spot. That is the opportunity, that the speed at which the number of people across various generations have become comfortable with the digital medium is staggering, right? Because if you talk about a customer acquisition journey from Facebook, from TV to Facebook to gaming, it was still a certain generation of people that were moving, from TV to Facebook and from Facebook to gaming. But today, because of the situation of all of us in lockdown, a lot of us living with our parents or helping our parents and older relatives be able to have a journey online, that gap has reduced considerably, and hence the customer acquisition cost has gone down considerably, because you're no longer just targeting young people on digital and older people across the country on TV, because all of them are on digital today, right? That is really point number one. And when it comes to the purchasing journey, for number one, firstly, the frenzy of the lockdown and the craziness of the lines that everybody went through pushed people to adopt to a completely different sort of a purchasing journey. So that kind of made life very easy for a lot of marketers, right? Because if you were available online, if you had already done the work of being available across various channels, you were the clear winner. There was no two ways about it. However, the crisis of shortage of supplies, the shortage of stock, also pushed for newer brand customers actually looking at newer options as brands to buy. That is another key shift that happened, right? My loyalty changed a little bit. I was no longer just looking at, I only buy this product, but I'm going to look at what is available for me. And the one that was available also won. The one that I could see always won. The one that was more authentic and had a larger purpose won. And those are key things for us to consider as we move forward as well, because this behavior is not going to change. The impact that this has had to our consciousness is not going to change. And we're going to continue to seek marketers to really push the boundary on why they exist and how far they're willing to go to acquire a customer. And that's really how I look at it.
So acquiring the customer, that's very interesting, because at the end of the day, every customer, everybody is a customer, no matter where they are. And the acquisition of the new customer is primarily being driven, is going to be driven in the future from a digital standpoint. I personally believe acquisition is going to be digitally driven. And if that is the case, where do you think, Pooja, is the start and the end of that journey? As James alluded, that comms and commerce, they need to come together. Is comms the initial starting point of that journey, or is the end, is it the means to the end? Where does it start and where does it end?
So for a second, if you take the complexity of marketing and martech tools, omni-channel, all of that out of the picture, right? And you look at a brand wanting to talk to a person in a time like this, how will you operate? Some amazing examples in times like this have been local businesses around our respective neighborhoods and the levels that they have gone to be able to acquire new customers. So is it going to be comms or commerce? I think it's a combination of both, because how you sell to somebody is very important. Now, I have a small example of a business in my neighborhood, which is a dairy business. It's a chain in Bombay. And these guys supply milk, cottage cheese, and yogurt to a lot. They usually deliver to people's homes, or people could actually go to the store and buy, etc. Their business took a massive hit when everybody went into lockdown. And I think what they, it's not always about big comms and big strategies, but they did one very simple thing. They went after apartment complexes in their around the stores that they had, and they created a WhatsApp group which said, "We're here to make you smile." And when you look at a WhatsApp group that said, "We're here to make you smile," you go like, "Oh, that's a gimmick," right? But then suddenly what they started doing there is that they had a delivery option for us on how I could get my milk, my yogurt, my cheese. And every time we bought from them, they sent us a box of sweets. And in India, in Indian culture, mithai, which is sweets, is a very big thing, right? It's a very warm, formal gesture. And every time we bought a product from them, they sent this to us. And I used to always buy my milk from Nestle, and I no longer buy my milk just from there anymore, right? It's a local business that helped win me over. And I think that is so key for a lot of businesses to consider, that it's sometimes simple things that matter.
I hope there are not many Nestle people on the call or listening, but they've lost a consumer. But it's very interesting, and I think it's the reality. The new age consumer is different. We need to be aware of the fact and cognizant of the fact that this consumer is very cautious consumer, is a connected and a versatile consumer, and consumers today are adept at filtering information. And they move effortlessly between channels, and that's the reality. We do it as consumers, and we should expect all the consumers for our services to do that. And there's this high expectation of value for money and quality, which is being driven. So from a business point of view, this innovation example that Pooja related was very interesting. Miss Tu, let me come to you. From a business perspective, do you believe consumers are an asset for innovation? In this particular case, which Pooja really spoke about, he had that audience of either that condominium or others, and that local service provider looked at that as an innovation angle of creating a WhatsApp group, sending tweets, etc. Do you fundamentally believe in an omni-channel world, in a consumer which is very ROI conscious, is digitally savvy, and has a proliferation of all these channels? Do you believe that consumers are an asset for innovation?
I think there are 2 points that I would like to address. Number one is that the consumer is hour-centric. So in order to do in marketing and business, consumer is hour-centric. So we need to stay with the consumer, and then we need to ensure that the consumer is the asset, like you mentioned. Number two, I also would like to echo on James and Pooja, a point of view is that acquisition is key, because here we do believe as a marketeer, penetration, acquisition, new users will be the way in order to grow the business, because we don't focus much on loyalty or repeat, but as much as we can expand the number of users, the number of acquisition. So that is our role for the business. Having said that, consumer is centric, and also expand the penetration, acquire as many new users as possible. Then we need to ensure that in terms of the business, agile working is key. So whatever the new innovation, something small like you just spot out, like the WhatsApp group, we would love to put the team, open up with the team, agile working, test and learn. As long as the KPI for the test and learn for the project is that what did you learn from the project, rather than the ROI measurement. Because I do believe that if we start with the ROI measurement for those kind of agile working, it not give you anything, because it's very small. And then we need to open to the team is that, hey, learning is key, and then open for failure even. But then how can we move it forward? How can we replicate? How can we adjust? And that is the model of business nowadays that I look at.
Okay, so thank you for that. We are getting a fair amount of questions. I do want to let everybody know that they can actually ask their questions on the screen. There is a Q&A tab there. You can click on that button and ask your question. I would request if you can actually give in your name and your company and designation, etc., so that the panelists find it easy and relatable to give you an answer for the question that you've sent. We will try and take those questions towards the end. And if there is anything specific that you want to allude to, or any points that any of the panelists are making, please do mention in your question, and I'll try and interrupt the panelists to be able to get you those answers. So it's interesting that we spoke about this, and you know, James, I want to come to you, and I'm going to share a quote on the screen before I actually, and I normally do this in all my panels, and this is a quote that I saw from Jeff Bezos: "Focusing on the customer makes a company more resilient." There may be questions on Jeff Bezos' commitment to that in the light of certain things that have happened in the recent past on their pricing model, etc. But irrespective of that, he's a person who's seen an opportunity, who's maximized that opportunity from the early .com bust, and has been able to provide, as an organization, been able to provide that focus on the consumers to be able to drive that. And that comes from pure leadership that he's shown in terms of driving that value for the business. And so as a person who's leading a fairly large human capital in the business that you are across Asia Pacific, and unlike some other industries, your entire capital is the human capital, your services, your businesses, all that. How do you show that leadership? How do you build that competitive position for the business while managing this entire brand experience, in your case, PhD, but delivering through that entire consumer value chain? Mm-hmm. How do you do that? For you, the consumer is also the brand. For you, the consumer is the brand's consumer is also the consumer. How do you build that? How do you build that?
Well, I think that's the is it the $5 billion question, I suppose, that we'll wrestle with. Listen, I sort of, there's quite a few bits in there, and I sort of, just to make it easier for me to sort of unpack a little bit. I mean, you know, the sort of the Jeff Bezos kind of quote about you know, focusing on the consumer makes a business more resilient. I mean, for me, and we've briefly chatted about this before, I think empowering a business to have a very clear vision and to understand what it is that we're putting first. So in leadership, and Amazon is obviously is a global juggernaut. If we sort of take it down a notch or two to my role in Asia Pacific, the reality is that I can't be in each of the 16 markets that I am responsible for across Asia Pacific, and you have to empower and entrust to the local management in each of the agencies, you know, 1,800 people, that they understand what our North Star is and what our values are. And the way that we do things. I mean, you can't be there and you can't be seen to be policing. So the quote that you sort of referenced from Jeff Bezos was kind of like, yeah, that's being very, very clear. What is our focus? Our focus is the consumer, and that should be really something that at any point where there's a little bit of hesitancy or uncertainty, they should be able to go to a check and say, is what I'm doing helping our customer? Is what I'm about to do, will that ultimately help our customer or our consumer? And if the answer is no, then probably you shouldn't be doing it. You know, that's the sort of the easy check and measure that you have there. So I think from a leadership perspective, having that very clear vision and having a very clear value set that your teams across the globe or across the region can rally behind, and they can do their own self-policing of what I'm about to do or what I've been asked to embark upon. Is it delivering value for our customer? Yes or no is a great litmus test. The other element I think that you spoke about of sort of building, how do we build and maintain those brands? I think that we have to be resilient and not be guilty of knee-jerk reactions. And I think that we've seen a lot of that happen in the last 6 months whilst we've been dealing with the COVID pandemic. The reality is that you know, marketing is long term, and most marketing only really pays back in the long term. I mean, it is a sustained effort. We talk about reach, frequency, saliency, long-term brand building. And I think that for a variety of reasons, some brands have been, and we have certainly spent huge amounts of time with our clients and our partners, you know, encouraging them to keep advertising, to keep communicating. Yes, you know, they don't want to appear tone deaf, you know, in terms of trying to ram, price points or promotions down their consumers' throat whilst they're dealing with a pandemic, and the social, economic, political environment is very, very volatile. But we do want them to make sure that they keep articulating an authentic message and the values of their brand, because the reality is it only does really pay off in the long term. So my advice to brands currently, and you know this, Rohit, philosophically, I'm very public about it, that I believe creative and media should be under the same roof. I'm afraid that was almost a decade of being at Dentsu and watching Dentsu Inc. work, that I do believe that creative and media should be under the same roof. But my advice to the brands is that they really need to kind of build sort of sharpen the bottom of the funnel in order to help them keep the lights on. You need acquisition, you need to be generating the revenue for your individual business. But the other side is you have to lift the top of the funnel. You have to have that creative, emotive, evocative, cut through creative work in market to build and sustain your brand. And in these increasingly digitized times, it's a lot of noise, but you have to lift the top as well as sharpening the bottom of the funnel. So again, I've matched your question with a lot of information back. So if you can pick through that, and if there are things that people want to build off, then happy to work through it more. But I do think, we have to, our role as whether it's a creative agency, as a media agency, as a marketers, in these times, it's not just about the efficiency of what we're doing, but also the effectiveness of what we're doing, of where we're actually deploying our resources and our thinking. Because if we just focus on being efficient, we just get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until we die out. We've got limited resources. Clients, marketers, consumers are expecting us to do with more, with less. And that means that we have to have a real focus on effectiveness as well as efficiency. So a lot in there, but they're some of the key points that I continue to work with our client partners to focus them in these uncertain times.
More with less is always the mantra, and I don't think that's going to change. It's always going to.
Yeah.
Let's come to the marketeer in the room. How do you look at it from a leadership perspective, Mistu? Do you agree with James in his point of lifting the top of the funnel and sharpening the bottom at the same time? And I do totally believe, and I agree with you, James, that marketing is long term. You cannot have knee-jerk reactions to either political or other environments or the pandemic environment. And brands tend to forget this. Brands tend to cut budgets when they need to show solidarity to the consumer for various reasons. And I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. There's no right or wrong. It depends on the strategy and the objective that a particular brand may have. But there are certain brands that have spent way beyond their means in these, especially personal care, milk, and other categories. And Mistu, you come from one such category. How do you guys see it? And what, in your personal view, not a FrieslandCampina view, what do you think is the way forward from a leadership perspective?
Actually, this is the question that we still figure it out, yeah? To be honest. I think it's challenging in the way that at the end of the day, on the marketeers nowadays, I'm sure that they're not looking also only spending in order to build a brand for the long term. But their role is also to handle the business. So BNL is also part of their role. Yeah? So you cannot no more. It's only marketeer to create the brand and build the brands. So when it comes to the BNL management, and during the challenging times, it's also very tricky in order to balance between the short term and the long term. So if the short term you cannot win, you cannot generate the top line, then very hard in order to manage the BNL. Let's face it, straightforward. Then here we need to think really agile working in the way that what kind of integrated channel communication building the brand that we can utilize and really use effectiveness. For example, that we focus on a certain group of consumer, and for some brands, we don't need to be index 100 over the index. So you need to slow down a little bit, because the moment that the top line, the sales volume can coming in, then it can fuel the brand in order to build. But then you cannot admit that it continue building the long term, and then you don't cover the short term, then the BNL, you cannot manage overall. So basically, there's no formula on that one. We need to see, depending on the brand, depending on the financial situation of the brand, depending on the financial situation of the company, then we can have the approach. But the approach here is that to balance of the short term and also the long term. Of course, that we know that impact of the brand will not for next month, but it will for years. And we need to be very cautious on every single money we spend, more careful in terms of iterated reach rather than just measure on TV, for example, GRP reach. So that is one note that the marketing need to really focus on.
Interesting. Do you have these difficult conversations, Pooja, with the marketeers? And what are you seeing of not what has happened in the last 3-4 months, but what do you see as the plan going forward for the next 6, 12, 18 months? And how do you pitch these discussions? Are these difficult discussions to have?
I more than difficult, I feel you have to go from a place of realization, right? You have a P&L. All businesses have P&Ls to run. And if you're not able to keep your business, if you're not able to make your business survive, there's no point marketing and all of that if the business in itself is not going to survive, right? So you have to go from a point of realization and putting yourself in the client's shoes as well, and accordingly go to them with solutions and options. Because the one thing that we're focusing on today as an organization is supporting our customer. And while supporting our customer, which is primarily our clients, also being extremely smart about how we are managing our own organization, right? Because if our organization is not able to control its costs, work efficiently, work with agility, almost rewrite the way you run an organization in a time like this, you're not going to be able to have a motivated workforce to come up with innovation to tackle your customer, and in this case, the client. So our objective with our clients is we need to help them ride this wave. And if we are their core partners while riding this wave, we will continue to have long-standing relationships with them. So with every category we handle, so be it alcobev, be it OTT, be it FMCG, it's about how can we rewrite the marketing experience for the new customer experience that they're seeking.
Can I interrupt you? I understand your perspective, how you want to drive it. Is that the discussion? Do the brands actually have that discussion, or is it somewhat different? Is it a difficult conversation?
The brands are having the discussion. Absolutely, they are. And it is as I said, it's not a difficult discussion. It is a discussion which needs to be had right now because of the situation that we are in. And if I'm getting your question correctly, you're asking me about the times that we're in and how spending will continue, right? How marketing budgets will scale up as we come out of this crisis. Is that right? Is that the key focus of the question?
I guess that, but the broader question is what James was alluding to is there is a long-term element. Marketing is always long-term, and it is also about making sure what Ms. Tu was saying, managing the business. While doing both of them, there are these short-term needs or short-term sides that people tend to look at and forget the long term. And the purpose of this panel that I have put together is there is no playbook for this. We've never experienced it. We've never seen this. I hope we never do see this something similar again. But coming out of this in a positive environment, I'm sure we'll all get out of it on the right side. We need to thrive. The advertising industry needs to thrive to do better so that we can sustain the growth, the humongous growth that the new consumer is going to bring to us. When we are doing that, how do you facilitate that transition? That is the key. I think what's done is done. How do you facilitate the transition going forward is where I'm alluding to. I don't think it's really about the marketing budget.
Got it. So the facilitation of transition is coming from the way customers are behaving, right? Let's take an alcobev example. The way we consume a beverage, an alcoholic beverage, has completely changed. It was always about the environment where you used to hang out. It used to be the bar, the music, the food, right? But today, that entire playbook has changed. You no longer have that at your, at your disposal. So how do we engage and help a business like that, which predominantly only survives with a larger environmental stimulus? How do you make that experience for the customer still stay as true to it as possible? And that is what we're focusing on as a business for all of our clients. And as we keep having these discussions with them, we're seeing how how things are changing. We're seeing how customers are becoming more and more open to consuming the products differently, and I think that is if we continue to stay in that direction, we will start seeing more positive changes. But sorry, go ahead. What were you
No, sorry. No, I was just building my next thought, and I wanted to go to James. Is we have these perspectives which Pooja shared from a brand perspective and with. But do you see this across markets, James? You manage what, 18 markets right now? Do you see
16?
similar pattern emerging everywhere? And does it really mean that you need to be at the same boat, or you need to have 2 feet in on two different patterns at the same time?
There's without a doubt there are different speeds or a sort of states of maturity or how advanced they are. Because if you were to, so you have to recognise that the pace of and we in Asia Pacific will say that, we have a very diverse, group of countries in Asia Pacific. But you talk to the guys in EMEA and they say exactly the same, or the people in the Americas say exactly the same. So we all believe that our markets or our region are all nuanced and different, and they are. But I think the way that it manifests itself, there are some key themes that come out of it. I mean, if we were to look at look at these. They're often referred to as walled gardens, in terms of China and what we're doing with, on WeChat and Tmall and Weibo and Ali and all the rest of it. We're seeing that there's terrific growth, and the reality that brands that may not have a D2C, so direct to consumer channel, from their headquartered market, whether that's in Western Europe or North America or the beginnings of businesses coming out of Asia. In order for them to succeed in China, then you have to have a D2C virtual shop front. You're taking your bricks and mortar and you're having to put it into Tmall or indeed what we're looking at now with Lazada and how they're working through. So you have to recognize that the markets are at different stages of their evolution, but woe betide anybody that kind of thinks that one of the markets that is a more emerging nascent market will travel the same path as a more advanced market. Woe betide that, because they often see the leapfrogging and they'll go straight to 5G, and then what does that mean for us? But there are tenets and there are principles that remain the same. And in order for brands to charter and to develop and progress in these markets, they have to have the fundamentals, that vision, those values, the direction of travel has to be set out. And then we will deal with the various channels that are most popular or the most prominent in each of those markets. And that's the role of the marketeer in the local market, to work with a partner. Some work with agencies, some want to do it themselves, but to be able to charter that progress and to have those local nuances and the channels there. You have to have that vision, you have to have the fundamentals. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. And I'm cognizant of the time, and we do need to take a lot of questions. We have a fair amount of questions. So to the panelists, my request is if you can review the questions that are coming, I'll try and take those questions in thematic formats. I have gone through some of them. In the meantime, for everybody on the panel, we are also going to do a few light-hearted polls. So the polls will be on your screens. Please do take time to take the polls. These are all very light-hearted polls, just to keep the spirit going. while we do that, I just wanted to come to the panelists and ask Ms. Tu, let me start with you about the example of an omni-channel process. And you were sharing with me, you've shared with me an omni-channel process that you've done for Friezos on a home delivery command. If you could just take maybe 2 minutes to share with us what that is, because it also addresses some of the questions.
Okay.
Which we have from Gautam and Michael Lee, etc., is about brick and mortar companies and not about IT companies. So I think it addresses some of those questions also.
Okay, good. So are you going to show the slide that I sent to you over to you, Rohit? Okay, yeah. Clear. Thanks. All right, so let me give you a little bit of background of Vietnam in April. We have basically the national social distancing, so kind of lockdown in Vietnam for 30 days. And the government giving us kind of the notice a few days or a week before. And as Friezo, serving moms, pregnant women, and also kids, mom with kids, mainly for kids 0 to 6 years old, infant powder milk. And in Vietnam, general trade is still contribute majority of the channel where the consumer go there to buy. Yeah. So with the lockdown, how can we do? What happened? Because e-com is here, but it's still very small contribution. Mom, the baby is still there. Hyper supermarket is there. But then it's also a losing down. Huh? So they still open, but there's still some shop closed. So as a team, we put few people in the team. And again, agile working is very important. Encourage them in order to come up with the solution in 7 to 10 days, including execution and put it on live. What do they do? So we know that from a mom perspective, staying home, cannot going out, taking care for the kid, the husband also staying home and working from home. And what we do is that we come up with the communication plan. So we react the campaign, meaning that, hey, mom, stay home, enjoy with your kid, don't care for going out. We will have the home delivery for you at our cost. At least we're showing our emotion, sharing with our consumers during the COVID time, serving the convenience for them. So we have the concept and the comms on the digital channels and also on our Facebook, on social. And we also work with the agency in order to do the chatbot here. So the chatbot will showing you what should be the state, the consumer log into the website and asking you how can we, where can we buy and what is the result, the product information and so on and so on. And after that, we set up also the back end. So basically, we're using the digital in order to have the communication. And then people filling in the form, and we have the CRM team work at the back end to help them to put the order and then send the order directly to our nutrition advisor, which is at the store working. Also, the nutrition advisor also working from home. But then we use also with Grab or with home delivery service so that they can go to the store, buy the home delivery service, and then deliver our consumers. So those kind of the back end we work, but at the consumer, they see the ad, they look into that, they asking, so commerce a little bit in there, and then the home delivery product will be at their home. So it seems like it's very simple in front of the consumer whole journey, but at the back end, we need to have the team in order to work and serving for that. So with that, I think for the 30 days of lockdown in Vietnam, we also serve quite a lot of consumers. And it's also something that the team would be very proud in order to share. And we are thinking maybe this is the model in the future. No need to wait for the lockdown because Vietnam is now lucky. We are back to the new normal. But I think this is also one of the ways that we can think in the future. How can we provide the convenience for the consumer by using the omni-channel? So that's the example I would like to share.
I personally think this is the future, and there's no need to go back to what used to be the way of doing things. I think these learnings will create the path forward of new beginnings, if you will, of what that omni-channel consumer experience and behavior should look like. Pooja, you also shared with me a video, and I'm going to run a very brief 20-second, 30-second video of that. And then if you can maybe help establish why you think is a great story of a new consumer experience that has happened. And I will add my 2 bits to that, and then we'll get straight to questions. We do have a couple of questions on the screen. If you guys have selected your options which you would like to answer, please do let me know. And people on the call, on the panel, you can, the audience can actually vote for the question that they most like the answer to be heard. Right now it is Dr. Katrina's question, which has 3 votes. So others also can give a vote. I'm going to play this video now, and then Pooja, if you could just explain what this was and why to you it really meant something very interesting.
Okay, I'm rolling camera. Oh, ready.
How to make a film during lockdown? Actually, wait, make that 4 films. Step 1, find a group of people crazy enough to attempt this. And brave. Crazy and brave. Like 90% crazy and 10% brave.
Production, art, sound, everything.
Step 2. Write it down. Right.
The script was a lot of outdoor shots. So I was wondering if we can take
What?
it.
No. And once you're done, don't forget to rewrite it down. Pray sanitization break. Step 3, pray that your Wi-Fi never gives up because you're going to be on a lot of calls.
So put your video on.
Can you see me?
A lot of calls.
Can you hear me?
Oh, now I can see it. 5, 2, 3, 4. This phone call should I keep running?
All the time. Step 3B, drink coffee. ढेर सारा coffee, like to a point where you're like, coffee, लगता है only coffee. Sanitization break. Step 4, be very, very patient.
I think I'll explain what the piece is.
So time लगेगा ना.
The video is lagging quite a bit. So let me talk about it.
Yeah.
So basically for Netflix, when we got into lockdown, Glitch, along with a few other partners, created 4 short series that actually rested on YouTube and not just on Netflix, the platform. And the exciting part about this whole project was that we looked at key consumer, key customer trends of conversations that were happening online, be it mental health, be it relationships during COVID, be it empathy during COVID, etc. And we crafted 4 stories, which were all shot remotely, produced remotely, actors who were directed on how to create their set remotely, be it lighting, be it the entire production, editing, the entire process of filmmaking for 4 series, which eventually rested on YouTube, was done remotely. And that really taught us that, it's no longer just about getting to set and, spending millions and millions of dollars on creating interesting pieces of content, that it can actually happen at this extent, to this extent remotely.
I truly believe, and I did a panel on content earlier in June, and I was talking about my personal observation was we've heard about crowd-funded advertisement, crowd-funded content, etc. But those were discussions that were very good discussions at panel conferences, etc. But for the first time, we've really seen quality product come out during this time, and I think that's the future. As James was alluding, creative and media do not need to be separate. They have to sit under the same umbrella. I agree with you. And I think even more so when you can leverage this crowd-funded environment, that's great. So I'm just going to quickly introduce one more poll. I shared the results with you for the last poll. This poll is, if you could time travel, where would you like to be? Past, the future, good where I am, or bypass 2020? Just for the people on the streaming services, they can't answer this question, but just a poll on the screen. While you guys take the poll, I have questions which I'm going to take Dr. Katrina Suri, actually, we did answer this question to a large extent, but I'm going to relate this out. It was around what are the thoughts of omni-channel mapped out and applied between generations, Gen Z versus millennials versus the aged people, and how do you offer those? I think we did address that. So I just wanted to get Pooja, maybe you addressed it. If there was any other elements that you would like to add to help answer this question for Dr. Katrina.
I think one thing to very clearly look at is not just the generational gap, which has the bridge which has been met, but also how you must continue talking to older TG online. And when you're crafting your marketing strategies, especially for agencies like us, we're primarily digital. We do a lot of digital work. The conversation about digital is let's talk to a younger TG. But today we're going to a lot of our clients and saying, people of various age groups are available online, and that's how we must change our comms as well. And it's not just about creating something for digital and something for TV. That's really the only piece that I'd like to add here. But everybody is online. Okay. That's how I look at it.
James, the next question I think falls really in your bucket is there are a couple of questions, and I'm actually building it into a thematic here. Is where do you see the biggest shift in advertising and communication driven by under the influence of COVID and going forward, given that you did touch upon the different speeds of different industries and markets? We have that.
I mean, the greatest acceleration is obviously it's e-commerce. It's the commerce element. There is no doubt about it. It has been turbocharged. For a variety of reasons. I mean, as I mentioned about the different speeds of the regions, the element they've had to look at their commerce capabilities just to keep the lights on. They need to be. I mean, we look at and across the region. I mean, you look at the F&B outlets. With lockdown, they've all just been completely shut. There's no revenue if they hadn't been able to adapt and to be able to move into food delivery and people ordering online. They just would have sort of completely wiped off the face of those sort of communities. So I sort of certainly feel that it has to be commerce and the digitization of commerce from here. That's hands down the biggest change, and that's the one thing that our roster of clients clambering of how do we engage in this sort of, I suppose you'd refer to it as a low touch economy that we're kind of moving into, where there isn't that much physical interaction, and people are accessing their information. They are communicating with people via the digital mediums. The ability to have authentic, accurate content that reflects both the personality and the values of the business is absolutely key. So you're paid, you're owned, and you're earned are incredibly important. Yes, sorry.
So within that, how do you handle this complicated customer journey? Is there a framework that is available, or is this something that is going to be chalked out by everybody and learned by themselves?
Yeah, well, I think it's a key sort of tenet of planning. I mean, it kind of comes back to the very base principles of how we plan and what is it we're trying to achieve. And I did see a question was on the bottom. I mean, I go to for anybody that is starting their journey around this topic. I mean, I go to the IPA and have a look at there's significant research with empirical evidence that shows and is backed up. And there was one of the earlier questions that I think you posed to Pooja about how do we have these conversations. And indeed, and Pooja gave a really great answer to that. And another question's popped up in the Q&A, like, I report to the head of sales. How can I, how do I deal with them? I mean, there is as I say, there is empirical evidence that talks about the role of creativity, the role of long-term planning and long-term positioning delivering ROI. So if you've got a head of sales that's saying, does this deliver me 5 sales, what's my return on ad spend, then you have to go through that education process. Because again, I'm referencing the IPA. I'm not sponsored by the IPA. Please don't anyone think that I am. But more specifically, look at Peter Field's research on the IPA, and that's for anybody that's listening onto this. And they talk about the most awarded creative campaigns and the effectiveness and the return on investment that they deliver. I mean, it is absolutely astounding to look at the empirical. And then again, for anybody, in fact, they're not familiar with that word, that empirical means it's backed up by statistics and data that are ratified and validated. It's out there.
And they are irrefutable because they are backed with empirical data. They are irrefutable examples.
Yeah.
So a couple of other questions, and then I know we are just over time now. So there are questions. One is with Gautam Mustafa and Johan Christina. I think the question is the same. Of how do you actually build for marketing in an omni-channel world? And maybe Ms. Tu, if I can take this to you, and this acquisition of consumers in the non-essential products categories like beauty product, cosmetics. I think it all falls under the same thing. How do you plan and strategize for things which are not obvious, which are not digitally driven? And you are in that business. So any pieces of advice?
Yeah, so I think omnichannel will be the big themes to go moving forward in the future. How can it look like, and what should be the success factors? I think we need to do and test and learn and figure it out. But I think there will be I would like to urge marketing and business kind of mindsets that don't think that the consumer know exactly and have one single consumer journey and one channel only. So look at the consumer journey and then put that online, offline, integrated, and that should be where we go. And like I mentioned earlier, where here we utilize the framework at 4C. C number 1 is catch. How can we ensure that we reach as many as possible via TV, via integrated communication? Then the second C is connect. How can we engage, provide the content, right? Social seating and those things like that. The number 3C is convert. Where do you think that the consumer can buy? Today they buy in TT channel, tomorrow they buy in other channels. So multi-channel, omni-channel, on and off, we cannot predict. And last but not least, when you already acquire them, by convert them, how can you continue? Make sure that always on will be there so that they can come back and repeat purchase. So it's kind of the funnel, and there's no playbook for it. We need to know and ensure that the moment that you get them in, ensure you retain them. And then this is the multi-channel that we need to look included, the branding parts, and also the sales part. So that is also at the end of the game.
I love the fact when my panelists start using the word, there's no playbook for this. There is. So quick sharing results of where everybody wants to be if they could time travel. Most of you want to be in the future. Some people are good where they are, and sizable 20% of the audience wants to bypass 2020, which I'm not sure is the ideal way, because the amount of learnings, the amount of changes that we are seeing right now, and you all always build from your experiences and learnings. I think bypassing 2020 will not be an ideal scenario for the future, and we will not be able to shape that future if we don't learn from where we are right now. Last question, and any takers for this? It's very close to my my personal passion, and therefore I want to take this. I know we are running a little bit behind schedule now. Is the pathetic state of UI UX. Jairaj Jatar is asking this question. Is marketers feel that digital channels of purchase are here to stay, but there's this pathetic state of UI UX and the creative around it on apps, and the lack of limitations in this, which doesn't necessarily help push brick and mortar, is what Jairaj's point is. Do you guys agree with this? And if yes, what, in very short 30 seconds, what is the solution?
I don't agree actually to that, because I think if you look at some of the big this may not be true to all brands, right? Because everyone's on their own journey of getting to where they need to get to. But a lot of them that are successful today have fantastic UI UXs. And in apps in India, I'm talking about Dunzo, I'm talking about Zomato, I'm talking about Book My Show. Some of the UI UX on these apps are fantastic. And the way they're learning from you.
Sorry, I'm interrupting you. I think his point is very specific. Brick and mortar companies. We have been talking a lot about the digital commerce companies. They obviously have the UI UX fixed.
But if you look at like a Nature's Basket, for example, right? The Nature's Basket, which is a supermarket chain in India, has got a fantastic UI, has got a fantastic app. It's constantly learning about your orders and constantly upping, sending you bundles as options. So there are people who are making those changes, but maybe not to a mass extent. But there are examples. There are good examples that exist today, and one needs to work towards getting there for sure.
I guess where Jayraj is coming from is there are exceptions, but generally, broad-based, that is not where it's working. James, to you.
I mean, it's I'm kind of with Pooja actually. I mean, it maybe take a little bit more explanation, because I do think that there are real efforts, and whilst the statement, and it is more of a sort of statement, holds truth that we've got a long way to go, but that's the constant evolution that we're in, and this iterative approach and design thinking. At the moment, many of the brands, and particularly the brick and mortar brands, have had to react quickly because of lockdown, COVID. Their stores are closed and they have to get things out there. So I think it's understandable and fair that they might not quite be, these polished consumer journeys, and yes, there are logins, and yes, we're dealing with any financial sort of transaction is, it can be cumbersome until new platforms have been delivered. But I don't think it will take as long. And then let's move it out of India, I think, which is where the particular sort of questions came from. And again, look at China, and you look at what they're doing with WeChat. I mean, you don't need to leave that environment, and your financial information is stored, where you live. It's all in within these apps.
And from the India market, the Dunzo example, sorry, Rohit, the Dunzo example I was giving is what, especially a lot of the local brick and mortar shops have now their e-com destinations on apps like Dunzo. I mean, that's fantastic. They've taken an assistant app and made it an entire e-com portal for brick and mortar stores in the neighborhood. So there are multiple options available, a large journey to get to, but multiple options available today for
Sorry,
brands.
I must now stress that we are running out of time. But before we do, I have one quick question for all three of you. In one word, what does future hold for you? In one word.
Success.
And openness. Absolutely.
Success. Openness. Mistu?
Just go.
Just go. Just do it.
Just do it.
Okay. Thank you very much, dear panelists. Thank you to you and to the audience. We are in the world where consumers are changing. Businesses must change. It is imperative that they do. They need to relook past the old structures, the inflexible cultures, if you will. If I'm not being very blunt, but you need to fail to learn, and you need to test to learn. And we will win over this well-informed consumer who happens to move from one channel to the other. It is in the nature of the new consumers. They are being brought up like that. I see it with my daughters, not so much myself. I do believe I'm a digital native, but I still am at loss when I see what my daughters do. So this is the new age of the consumers, to complement the patterns of theirs. I really like a couple of comments, and just to summarize this discussion, really like this comment on the 4Cs, catch, connect, convert, and continue. I think that is really the mantra going forward. Sharpening the bottom of the funnel and lifting the top is imperative for brands and marketeers because it is a long-term solution. We are not going to resolve this in one panel, in one discussion, but this is going to continue. And when we come out on the other side of this, no knee-jerk reactions will show best use cases for us. It needs to be done with a strategy, with a thought behind it. And I'm sure everybody on the call and all of us are learning from each other and will help build a playbook as we get out of this. Thank you once again. I will like DJ Rohan to take us to the end. Thank you once again and appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Weekend, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Turn it up now. Come on, people, put your hands up now. Turn it up now. Come on, people, put your hands up now. Turn it up now. Come on, people, put your hands up now. Turn it up now. Come on, people, put your hands up now. Turn it up now. Come on, people, put your hands up now. Turn it up now. Come on, people, put your hands up now. Put your hands up now. Turn it up.